Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's Dina Calmetta here. And for today's news, I've got quite a few headlines I'd like to share with you for this Bible Prophecy Wednesday update. And I'd like to start with what is happening with Russia. It is being reported Russia is warning of a nuclear Armageddon after Trump's latest Ukrainian move. Russia's state TV propagandist and war pundit Alexander Sladkov said that Trump is trying to scare us with missiles, but this is difficult to do. Trump should be scared. Everyone is trying to push us to turn Kyiv into Hiroshima. The new Trump deal greenlights a supply of possibly $10 billion worth of defensive and offensive missiles and other arms to be paid by U.S. allies in Europe, along with Canada, as well as the threat of sledgehammer sanctions if Putin refuses to negotiate in the next 50 days. The TV propagandist declared that imagine our country under attack by American cruise missiles, like Yugoslavia, Iraq, etc. I am sure that the Yars should go in response. Now, for those of you that are not aware, Yars are Russia's main land-based strategic nuclear weapons. Each missile typically carries 3 or 4 nuclear warheads. Each has a yield estimated between 1 and 300 kilotons, making each warhead between 7 and 20 times more powerful than the bomb that dropped on Hiroshima. But the propagandist went on to say the question is about survival of our country. We are already at war. It cannot be avoided. The West is tasked to destroy our country. We are not fighting in Ukraine. We are fighting with NATO. Understand this already. It's also being reported that President Putin is seriously contemplating the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. This is according to a former high-ranking British Army officer. But it goes on to read that despite Russia's overwhelming advantage in manpower and weaponry, it has struggled to make substantial progress on the battlefield. A recent study by the U.S. Center for Strategic and International Studies highlighted that since January 2024, Putin's army has only managed to capture approximately 5,000 square kilometers of territory. This represents less than 1% of Ukraine's total land area and has been achieved at a steep price in terms of lives lost and equipment expended. An expert on weapons of mass destruction stated that the fact that Putin and its gangsters have threatened nuclear attack continuously since a wider war in Ukraine began suggests they are thinking about it in detail. He also expressed concern over the prolonged conflict in Ukraine, stating that as 3 days have been 3+ years, they may think that they can finish off Ukraine quickly with tactical nukes and we would not react. But Russia just doesn't have its eyes on Ukraine or the United States. It's also been reported that the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated on Monday that Germany is becoming dangerous again. He was responding to remarks by the German defense minister, who suggested that German troops are ready to do away with Russian troops, if you know what I mean. Speaking to RBK Business Daily, Peskov said it is hard to believe that Pistorius actually made the comments, but unfortunately this is so. Germany, he said, is becoming dangerous again. If deterrence doesn't work and Russia attacks, is it going to happen? Now, Germany stated that any talk of peace can only be possible in equal terms and from a position of strength. While Germany is not seeking to intimidate anyone, no one should think that we're weak or that we won't defend ourselves. The Russian threat has long been a key talking point for various officials from NATO countries. Moscow has dismissed speculation that Russia plans to attack the US-led bloc as nonsense. Last month, Peskov suggested that the bloc needs a monster to justify its existence and growing defense costs, stating that they have made a monster out of Russia in order to justify the decision to increase NATO defense spending to 5% of GDP. Now, another gentleman by the name of Dmitry Trenin, a research professor at the High School of Economics and lead research fellow at the Institute of World Economy and International Relations, boy, that was long, is stating that World War III has already begun. He goes on to say that this war involves the world's leading powers, the United States and its allies on one side, and China and Russia on the other. It is global. Not because of its scale, but because of the stakes, the future balance of power. The West sees the rise of China and the resurgence of Russia as threats. Now, switching gears, Prophecy Newswatch wrote a very interesting article, and it reads, "The Coming Pacific War. China, Taiwan, and the West prepare for conflict." It goes on to state that a clash over Taiwan is no longer a distant scenario. It's a growing possibility shaping the military strategies of the world's most powerful nations. Recent developments across Asia and the Pacific reveal how deeply entrenched this crisis has become. China is flexing its military muscle in unmistakable ways, and Taiwan, for its part, is shifting into a full-scale defensive posture. And Western allies from the US to Australia to Japan are rehearsing for war. The pieces are moving, and they are moving fast. This week, a dramatic footage emerged from China's southeastern coast showing dozens of tank boats charging through the sea in a display of raw amphibious power, conducted by the PLA's 72nd Group Army just off Fujian Province, directly across from Taiwan. The live-fire exercise featured tightly scrutinized armored units firing weapons and simulating a sea-borne invasion. But this was only one layer of Beijing's increasingly menacing drills. Reconnaissance troops from the PLA's 73rd Group Army were seen engaging in underwater combat and long-range infiltration exercises, an ominous indicator of the type of war Beijing may be preparing for. Meanwhile, China's sea monster, a Cold War air technology reborn, was spotted in the Bohai Sea. With the ability to skim just above the surface of the water at high speeds, it could be used in surprise coastal landings or rapid reinforcement missions. More alarming still were satellite images released earlier this year showing 3 of China's new invasion barges linking together to form a floating bridge. The message from Beijing is clear. We are practicing for war. Now, Taiwan, a flourishing tech democracy of 23 million, has no illusions about the threats that it's facing. In response to China's provocations, Taiwan launched its largest ever military drills just this week, as I reported on Monday, mobilizing 22,000 reservists and conducting scenarios based on real-world threats such as missile strikes, cyber attacks, and decapitation strikes against command centers. Interestingly, Taiwan's defense officials are using Israel's recent 12-day war with Iran as a case study. Taiwan's strategy is of survival, air defense system, decentralized supply networks, nimble command units, and boistered civilian defense. They're planning not just for a war, but for endurance. Now, across the Pacific, allied nations are not sitting idle. The United States, Japan, and Australia recently concluded that Southern Jackaroo, a joint military drill involving thousands of troops operating in the Australian bush, while no enemy was named. Those involved made it clear the focus was on preparing for a conflict with China. Artillery teams from Japan and Australia fired in unison, guided by embedded U.S. Marines. Tilt-rotor Ospreys delivered troops to beachheads. Fighter jets trained for aerial superiority. The symbolism was potent. If China moves on Taiwan, these allies plan to fight as one. It's a gathering storm. China accuses the West of provocation. But in reality, it's China's unrelenting pressure, military flyovers, cyber incursion, diplomatic isolation campaigns that have forced Taiwan and its allies into a corner. And yet, this isn't just about a military showdown. It's about defending the idea of freedom in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan, like Ukraine, is a front line in the battle. The cost of the conflict could be catastrophic, but the cost of unpreparedness could be worse. In this rapidly shifting environment, deterrence depends on unity. That's why you see US, Japanese, and Australian troops sharing bunkers and battle plans. That's why Taiwan is digging deeper into its defenses and studying how Israel defected a superior foe. The war for Taiwan hasn't begun, but the world is already training for it. And that should sober all of us. The Times of Israel is reporting that there is border chaos as 1,000 Druze breach frontier into Syria. The IDF has struck and hit Damascus. The havoc on the border was mirrored in Damascus as Israel punctuated its demand that the Syrian regime leave the Druze community alone, with a series of airstrikes targeting the country's military infrastructure. Syrian government forces entered the majority Druze city of Swida on Tuesday with the stated aim of overseeing a ceasefire agreed on with the Druze leaders after clashes with local Bedouin tribes left more than 100 people perishing. However, witnesses reported that the government forces joined with the Bedouin in attacking Druze fighters and civilians in a rampage throughout the city. It was the second day in a row that Israeli Druze has managed to breach the border with Syria, with dozens persons crossing the frontier on Tuesday. The IDF called the border crossings a grave incident that constitutes a criminal offense and endangers the public and the IDF forces. This was echoed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who issued a video statement imploring members of the Jewish community not to cross the fence. The U.S. said to press for a halt to Syria's strikes. We told the Israelis to stop and take a breath. Syria on Tuesday condemned Israeli strikes. In a statement, they said that a number of our armed forces and security personnel, as well as several innocent civilians, have perished. Also stating that Damascus holds Israel fully responsible for this aggression and its consequences, stressing Syria's legitimate right to defend its land and its people by all means permitted under international law. So I guess at this point, peace talks with Israel and Syria are just going to have to wait. So since we're on the topic of Damascus, what does prophecy tell us about Damascus? Well, Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1, God says, "The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap." So eventually over time, it already looks like a ruinous heap right now, unfortunately, but over time, many theologians believe it will be actually unlivable, uninhabitable. So very interesting news today about Damascus. The Guardian is reporting that a UN summit on a two-state solution for Palestine and Israel has been postponed by the Israel-Iran war, but it has been rescheduled for July 28th and 29th. But it is not expected that the French president, Macron, will attend, making it less likely that it will trigger a series of high-profile announcements or on recognition of a Palestinian state. Macron stated last week that a two-state solution was the only way to build peace and stability for all in the whole region, and has been trying to build momentum for recognition of a state of Palestine by a wide group of countries. But the lack of movement in ceasefire negotiations between Hamas and Israel is making such decisions more complex. Israel and the U.S. both oppose recognition of a Palestinian state and has been advising UN delegations not to attend the UN conference in New York. Israel has stated that the recognition would be seen as a reward for Hamas. The conference, originally slated for June, as I had reported in prior shows, was postponed due to the war between Israel and Iran. Now, recognition was discussed last week at an Anglo-French summit where Macron made two public appeals without setting a timetable. He also called for recognition in a speech to UK parliamentaries and his closing press conference, stating, "With Gaza in ruin and the West Bank attacked on a daily basis, the perspective of a Palestinian state has never been put at risk as it is. And this is why the solution of the two states and the recognition of the state of Palestine is the only way to build peace and stability for all in the whole region." The joint declaration issued by Macron and the UK Prime Minister simply reaffirmed their commitment to recognizing a Palestinian state as a contribution to a peace process, and they pledged to work together to support its development and the realization of a two-state solution. So let's sum up this first half of the show regarding wars and rumors of wars and also what's happening with Israel. So we are definitely witnessing wars and rumors of wars, as noted in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Are we seeing the beginning stages of World War III? I think that we are. We're definitely not in a full-blown war, world war per se, but we are witnessing wars. And we're going to see more wars during the tribulation period, as in the book of Revelation, we're told that the red horse is going to go galloping in. So we will see more wars during the tribulation period. So is there any reason why we wouldn't see a World War III right now? Well, we've seen World War I, World War II, and as I said, I think we're seeing the beginning stages of World War III. Do we want that? No, of course not. We don't want to see another world war. But there could be no denying that there are tensions. And this thing with Russia could get blown out of proportion with the US and NATO if they're not careful. So let's just pray and hope that cooler heads will prevail. But let's talk about Israel in this two-state solution. They're putting a lot of pressure on Israel to form a two-state solution. And we know that God is very clear in his word about those that part his land. We know in Joel chapter 3 verse 2 that suggests that God will judge the nations who scatter and divide the people of Israel in their land. Israel will become a burdensome stone to all nations, and we're seeing that now. The entire world will be intoxicated with Israel, and that is exactly what we are witnessing right now. The obsession with parting God's land will have catastrophic consequences, and it will be no different for the United States when she also, at a point in time, will turn against Israel. How do we know that? How do we know that even the United States, Israel's most closest and faithful ally, will turn against her? Because God says in Joel chapter 3 verse 2, I will gather all nations. So the United States is included. He doesn't say except for the United States. He says all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Josaphat, and will plead with them for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Zechariah chapter 12 verses 2 through 3. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. So he's saying here that those that mess with Israel, he's going to cut into pieces. So he's pretty clear here. All that burden themselves against Israel will face judgment. But unfortunately, a lot of these leaders don't take the Bible seriously. And so during the tribulation, they're going to see judgment when they divide the land of Israel. So a two-state solution, not going to work out so well according to the Word of God. So with that said, let's switch gears and talk about what else is happening in the world. Big Brother gets new powers in China with digital ID system. So why do I bring this up? Because this is the introduction to a beast-like system. And we're also going to talk about what they're doing in Europe as well. China has long mastered what was considered impossible, completely controlling the internet within its borders. On Tuesday, Beijing took another step towards centralizing its power over the web, introducing a government-run digital ID system that will enable it even more closely censor and surveil the country's 1 billion internet users. China has enforced a real name registration system for over a decade, meaning that Chinese internet companies almost always know the true identity of users who are, say, ordering a dress online, leaving a social media comment, or even playing a video game. With the new centralized ID system, the Chinese government will take over the process. Users who submit a trove of personal information, including scans of their faces, will receive a unique code to access online accounts. This means like social media companies or online shopping companies will no longer be able to see the personal information of their users with digital IDs. But Chinese authorities will be able to see the real identity behind online accounts across a range of sites. Although it's voluntary, experts fear it may not remain so, or that it will become so widely required as to make it effective. In the meantime, Europe's not far behind. Prophecy Newswatch is again reporting, imagine a world where every traction you make, every website you visit, every thought you dare to express online is silently recorded, cross-checked, and stored. Not just by tech giants, but by your government. Imagine your identity, bank access, health records, and even your ability to travel or speak freely, all locked behind a single digital key, one that can be disabled without warning. Well, you don't have to imagine that anymore. The world is already here, and Europe is leading the charge. Under the guise of safety and convenience, the European Union has begun implementing a sweeping framework of digital control. 2 pillars support it: the Digital Services Act, which dictates what you're allowed to say, and the EU Digital Identity Wallet, which determines who you're allowed to be. Together, they are transforming Europe into something chillingly dystopian. A continent once proud of its democratic legacy is quietly building a digital fence, one that no citizen will be able to escape from. On paper, the Digital Services Act claims to protect citizens from harmful content, but behind its language of safety lies something far more dangerous: a tool for censorship. Disinformation, hate speech, illegal content are now whatever Brussels says that they are. If your beliefs conflict with prevailing political ideologies, whether on sexuality, morality, or truth itself, you can be silenced. Not just in one country, but across the entire European bloc. It's no longer paranoia to say that the government is watching. It's now policy. Combine this with the growing reach of the EU Digital Identity Wallet, an app that will soon store your driver's license, health records, tax status, educational history, and more. And you have a society where everything about you is digitized, categorized, and controllable. This is no longer voluntary. More and more services will soon require digital identification. Lose access to your ID wallet and you could lose the right to bank, travel, work, or even to speak. Sound familiar? Does it sound like something we've talked about before on this channel? Well, actually, yes. This is not a political shift, you guys. It's a spiritual one. The Bible warns of a time when no one will be able to buy or sell unless you carry a certain mark. A global system of control. A counterfeit kingdom where loyalty is demanded and truth is punished. Could these digital systems, framed as helpful tools, be laying the groundwork for exactly that? Well, when your ability to function in society is tied to a digital ID, and that ID is tied to ideological compliance, you are no longer free. You are owned. We are witnessing the infrastructure of Revelation chapter 13 being assembled right before our very eyes. A beast-like system that merges commerce, identity, and belief into a single coercive structure. It may not look like tyranny now. That's the brilliance of it. Tyranny dressed in progress, oppression disguised as innovation. Today's a digital wallet. Tomorrow it may be your only lifeline to the world, and it can be cut off at the push of a button. The warnings of Scripture were not metaphorical poetry. They are prophetic alerts. We are closer than ever to the world the Bible describes, the tribulation period. So the question is no longer, will it happen? It's how soon, and are you ready? Revelation chapter 13 verses 16 through 18 says, "And he," who's he? That is the false prophet, ultimately the Antichrist, "but he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom, let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is a number of man, and his number is 666. So, as I stated in prior shows, this mark you will not be able to buy or sell anything without it. So these digital IDs, these digital wallets, again, the introduction to a time where it will be mandatory to have a mark on your right hand or in your forehead to buy or sell anything. So moving forward, let's talk about the animals that have been perishing. I put together just a quick summary over the last few years, how many animals that we have lost, generally speaking, because the Bible tells us that in the last days, animals will perish. And we'll get into those verses in just a little bit. So around how many animals have died? Globally, around 5.5 million vertebrate animals are killed daily by vehicle collisions, resulting in 2 billion deaths per year. Additionally, countless amphibians, reptiles, and birds are not fully counted, especially on busy roads or during breeding seasons. Barns and facility disasters. In the U.S. alone, an analysis from 2013 to 2017 found 2.7 million farm animals died in just 326 bonfires. Europe, Netherlands, Canada also reported large-scale fire losses. Canada saw 610,000 farm animal deaths from fires between 2015 and 2018, so about 150,000 a year. Recent U.S. estimates indicate 1.6 million plus farm animal deaths in barns in 2020 alone, with another 681,000 in 2021. And more than 500,000 in 2022. The 2025 projection, assuming similar patterns, approximately 500,000 to 1 million farmed animals, mostly poultry, pigs, are lost in barn fires each year. Now, what about disease or pests or other untracked causes? Farm animals frequently die from disease, accidents, or euthanasia due to health issues. While precise 2025 data isn't available right now, on farm mortality rates in cattle alone were significant pre-2020. Wildfire disease, environmental disasters, and pest control contribute further deaths, though global statistics are scattered and limited. For 2025, a conservative estimate is that 2 billion animals have died from non-food causes, so not being killed to feed us, you guys. If we include unrecorded disease-related losses and insects, the total could reach into the low tens of billions, though the largest category, 2 billion, is from roadkill alone. So let's dig a little bit deeper. For 2025, livestock disease and farm accidents with animals is 100 to 300 million plus. Periodic bird mortality events, thousands to tens of thousands. Lightning strikes, hundreds of thousands. Total non-food animal deaths likely to exceed 100 million. And in a full year tally, might reach hundreds of millions when combining all major causes. Lightning alone causes approximately 80% of accidental livestock deaths. Informal data suggests around 100,000 farm animals annually that die. Mass events. One lightning strike killed nearly 20 cattle in Texas, and another struck a whole herd internationally. These events have killed 300 plus reindeer in Norway and 550 sheep in Georgia. Now, mysterious mass bird deaths. Newcastle, Australia, just this year, reports that hundreds of corellas fell from the sky, with investigation underway for poisoning or disease that confirmed at least hundreds. California, exploding birds, you guys. Richmond residents found 50 birds recently. Labs suspect trauma, but an investigation is ongoing. So in 2025 so far, confirmed bird deaths in the hundreds to low thousands, primarily tied to mysterious illnesses or local events. And of course, we've got global avian disease outbreaks that could add to tens of thousands. On July 14th, poisoned birds were dropping from the sky in Springvale, South. On July 7th, authorities investigate mysterious mass fish kill in Australia. On June 23rd, worst smell in the entire world, neighbors react to fish kill in Treasure Coast Canal. May 12th, mysterious exploding bird epidemic in Bay Area neighborhood. March 23rd, surge of dead birds on South Haven beaches. March 27th, bird carcasses reportedly appear on Lake Michigan. March 12th, sea of dead fish emerge. February 27th, why were geese found dead at Sayreville Park? February 19th, massive fish kill at historic Papnish Lake in Badar. February 18th, dead fish wash up on Sarasota County beaches as red tide moves in. State agency says reason for fish kill remains a mystery. February 9th, thousands of bird carcasses are washing up the shores of Great Salt Lake. February 4th, mass fish kill at Lake. More than 60 birds found in Plymouth on January 23rd, and it goes on and on and on. January 14th, investigation launched after 30,000 dead fish found on Pabera Coast. That's a lot of fish, you guys. We're told in the books of Zephaniah and Hosea that God will indeed take away the animals from the earth due to sin. Zephaniah chapter 1 verse 3 says, I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of the heaven and the fishes of the sea and the stumbling blocks with the wicked. And I will cut off man from off the land, saith the Lord. Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. Because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out. And blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish, with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. So certainly a uptick in animals perishing, which is very sad because I love animals, all kinds of animals. I don't particularly care for bugs, but God has a purpose for everything. And so to see these animals perishing is truly sad. But with that said, let's talk about what else is happening in the world. What is going on with the floods, you guys? Here's a report from Michael Schneider of the Most Important News. He is such a good writer, you guys. I really do encourage you to go over there and visit his website. Go and pick up a book from Amazon. He is an exceptional writer and he's passionate about what he writes about. So go over there, check him out. But he picks up where we left off on Monday, stating that 2025 has certainly turned out to be a year that has been filled with chaotic natural disasters. In particular, we have been hammered by one major flood event after another in recent weeks. A couple of days ago, he says, I wrote about the 1,000-year storms that hit Texas and North Carolina. Well, as you're going to learn, those storms produced a dozen 1,000-year floods in just 3 days. Even seasoned meteorologists were stunned by that. And then on Monday, we witnessed terrifying flooding in New York and New Jersey. So is even more flooding in our future? Well, according to WPLG TV meteorologist Michael Lowry, 2025 is the year of the flood. And he has noted that so far this year, the National Weather Service has issued more flood warnings than any other year on record. In fact, there have been times when particular areas have been flooded quite dramatically. We have never seen anything quite like this. In 2025, it feels like the entire country is getting deluged. A 1,000-year flood is supposed to be rare. But we just witnessed a 3-day period when Texas and North Carolina both experienced multiple 1,000-year floods. Even our top experts are struggling to explain what just occurred. For example, the following comes from AccuWeather article entitled, How Did We Get a Dozen 1,000-Year Floods in 3 Days? For home insurance purposes, a 100-year flood means that there is a 1% chance of that flood happening in any given year at your home's location. A 1,000-year flood would be a 0.1% chance. So in 1,000 years, you'd expect one such flood to occur. But statistics don't dictate when during that period the floods will occur, and the floods could happen in rapid succession without violating the rule. These flood statistics are based on how often the nearest USGS river gauge, there are about 7,500 nationwide, would exceed a certain amount of water flowing past it. Based on records at those stations, that goes back as far as 175 years. So Michael goes on to say, I think that what they are saying is that what we just witnessed is highly unusual, and highly unusual events just continue to happen. In fact, on Sunday morning, the water level in One River, Texas suddenly surged more than 30 feet in just a few hours. And then on Monday, New York City was hit by the second wettest hour that it has ever experienced, with terrifying footage all over the place showing strap hangers trapped on subways by the freak flash flooding. New York City picked up a hair over 2 inches overnight, making it the second wettest single hour ever recorded in the city. It was bested only by the nearly 3 inches of rain that fell in New York City during the aftermath of Hurricane Ida in 2021. By now, you have probably already seen footage of the chaos that all of that water created. At one point, floodwaters came roaring through a subway station in Manhattan. And you know what, you guys? Living in Queens and having to take the train to work into Manhattan, not a pretty thing if you're having to deal with floodwater. In fact, video captured an eyewitness at 23rd and 28th Street on the number 1 train showed the water even rushing into the subway car as riders stood on the seats to avoid the water. New Jersey was hit extremely hard as well. The damage was so bad that the New Jersey governor actually declared a state of emergency. But unfortunately, not everyone made it through the flooding safely. At least 2 people perished in New Jersey after the flash flooding swept away their vehicle during a storm that pounded the Northeast with heavy rains. What we have been witnessing is just crazy. This week alone, Michael says he has written about major flooding events in Texas, North Carolina, New Mexico, Illinois, Vermont, New York, and New Jersey. And it is being reported that at one stage on Monday, there were over 50 million Americans that were under some sort of flood warning. Have we experienced a national flooding crisis before? He says, I can't recall anything like this in my entire lifetime. But what we are witnessing is not even close to normal. And after what we have been through this past week, hopefully more people are starting to understand that. Now, I give you guys the verses in Matthew where Jesus says, just as it were in the days of Noah, so also shall it be in the coming of the day of the Son of Man. Noah had floods. Obviously, the days of Noah were the days of the flood, the major flood, the big flood that God promised to never flood the entire earth again with a rainbow. But we will see flooding. And when he talks about just as it were in the days of Noah, he's also referring to the sin and the immoral behavior of the world. And we can see examples of that in Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, the sin in the world. But the United States isn't the only place that is seeing flooding. In Mexico, 1 perished, 12 injured after severe flooding in La Matasenica, and that occurred from July 15th to July 16th. A month's worth of rain in 2 hours floods roads and tunnels in Moscow. Back to North Carolina, floods create sinkholes and submerge roads in central North Carolina. Multiple vehicles stranded during flash flood emergency in Colonial Heights and Petersburg, Virginia. That occurred on July 14th. 2 to 3 inches of rain fell within 2 hours. Heavy rainfall and flash flooding threatened Florida and the Gulf Coast as Invest 93L moves westward, and that occurred on July 15th. Massive flooding due to severe rainfall hits Lithuania on July 11th. Severe thunderstorms caused major flooding and power outages in eastern Ontario and southern Quebec, Canada. 3.9 inches of rain in 90 minutes. So absolutely the year of the flood all over the world, you guys. In the meantime, Joel chapter 2 verse 30 says, and I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The New York Post is reporting that the Iceland volcano has erupted, prompting evacuation of the town and Blue Lagoon geothermal spa. The eruption began around 4 a.m. following an intense seismic swarm, with the Grindavik town being evacuated shortly after the seismic activity began, with campers and guests in the Blue Lagoon forced to quickly pack their bags. In the meantime, the Watchers is reporting that a sudden explosive eruption at the Erta volcano in Ethiopia's Denka Depression produced a dense ash plume on the morning of July 15th, interrupting its recent phase of steady lava activity. And critical fire weather conditions occurred through the northern Rockies, as well as Colorado and northeast Utah. So certainly a lot happening in just the last 48 hours, and no doubt we are absolutely watching Bible prophecy right before our very eyes. And I'd love to hear from all of you and get your thoughts. So please do leave your comments below this video. When you have a free moment, come and visit me on our social media pages and also on our website at www.cww7news.com. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, God bless and stay safe.